James Farr here. Get ready for more piercing and provocative conversation live from Pasadena Media. The Conversation Live starts now. Welcome to another episode of The Conversation Live. I'm your host, James Farr. The Conversation Live focuses on social justice, restorative justice, inclusion, and equality. You might be watching this live or you're watching a replay. Make sure you like and share right now. Let somebody know. Check in with the comments. My guest today is Major Williams. Major is running for mayor of Pasadena. Major, how you doing, brother?
Doing great.
Good.
Thanks for having me.
Reach over here, man. So it's a whole lot of talk around town about Major Williams.
Right.
And I remember when, I probably got maybe 10, 15 emails or phone calls like, who is Major Williams?
Right.
And I was like, I don't know. I've never heard of him. Not that that's a qualifier.
For sure.
But I don't know, know, and so I decided to reach out to you and we had a chance to talk briefly, but I wanted to invite you onto this program so I could have a better understanding, give our audience a better understanding of who Major Williams is and what his backstory. You're pretty ambitious, you certainly have some goals in terms of becoming the mayor, but we're gonna figure out what you're really about, all right?
All right, I'm with it, let's do it.
So I know you were raised in Dallas, Texas, so I kind of want to give a little bit of backstory.
Okay.
You share with me, you grew up pretty much in an impoverished community, in the hood.
For sure.
And then, so you understand things from a pretty simple and meager means. Tell us a little bit about growing up in Dallas.
So grew up in Dallas, Texas, raised by a single parent. My mom, Anita, had 3 sisters, one older sister, Tina, I have Amanda, which is my youngest, and the middle sister, Ebony. And we grew up in a section of Dallas called South Dallas, which is kind of like the urban suburban area adjacent to downtown. And as you said, it was a very impoverished, place. I remember there were times when me and my older sister were sleeping on the floor in one of the rooms, and we literally heard like things and running up under the floor, and we heard the wind feel gusting through the floor because there was no seams in the floor. And during the summertime, we just used to have the church fans just walking around the house and different things of that nature. And I grew up in an environment seeing my mom struggle. I can process it better now to know that she was struggling, but back then, as a kid, you don't acknowledge that, kind of in that way. But what I did experience is absolute love from an individual person that had great aspirations for her kids. And more so me with being the only boy, her raising a man, she was really aggressive with me, but she gave me a lot of leeway as well too. And
but were there any mentors? Mom was an excellent support system, but where did you find? Because we'll talk about that a little bit later on. In terms of that absentness that was in your life. Who were some of the men that you kind of patterned or modeled yourself after?
I would say some of the early on, I would say this gentleman by the name of Roderick Howard. He worked for the Dallas Housing Authority, which is where I started getting my first interest in being in public service, actually volunteering and being with him every single day. He was also my coach as well. There's another gentleman by the name of Lo Andrews. He is a lifelong banker as well. And we have a very interesting story on how we actually connected, but he's someone that wasn't in my community, but he put on a basketball camp, and from that basketball camp we stayed in touch. And just from the imagery of what he symbolized, it actually gave me a lot of motivation. Even though he gave me one-on-one consultation and uplifted me a lot, but what he symbolized, he has no idea, gave me a different perspective on what I wanted to accomplish, to be like and get a good job and have the family and different things of that nature. Another person I would say is, his name is Charles Haywood. Charles Haywood is a very dynamic individual. He was a drug dealer. He used to date my mom. but very.
Well, I mean, why the significance on the drug dealer? I mean,
the significance because of that is because I think it goes with the narrative of what young boys in that environment glamorize, right? So he was this huge figure in our neighborhood. We used to actually play baseball with wads of money in our backyard. Like, he would just throw it to me just playing around, and then he would undo it and give me some cash. He was the first person to ever give me a $100 bill. And so that's the significance from that mentality as a young kid, even though I have the ability to look at someone like Lo Andrews, who was a banker and super professional and educated, but with that mindset as a young kid, of course, that is the most glamorous thing that you saw. And thankfully, he had so many words of encouragement to keep me away from those avenues as well, and encouraged me to do the exact same thing that the professionals that were in my life and the coaches as well.
So you had the duality of the streets as well as the boardroom in terms of kind of crafting and shaping who you were. You were a student athlete as well.
Absolutely.
And then you went on to college. And something you said to me, you know, before we even got into this interview, is that you said you never experienced racism growing up in Dallas. And I just like, how's that possible? You know,
okay.
Let's unpack that a little bit.
Oh, the racism part?
The racism, yeah.
So I told you I didn't experience racism ever when I was growing up in Dallas. But as I became an adult, I was able to figure out and find out why that was, right? And so now that I look back, the reason why I didn't experience racism in Dallas is because I never went out of my neighborhood. We partied in our neighborhood. We went to all the recreation centers in our neighborhood, all the birthday parties, the skate parties, the public swimming pool. Everything was in our neighborhood. And so when you have limited resources and limited funds, you're going to find out that you're going to stay really close to home. And we didn't have a car off and on. The car that we had couldn't go past 6 miles.
But you told me about that story when you got to college.
Right.
And
right.
what that experience was. You want to share that?
That particular story, I was at Louisiana Tech University. I think it was my first year there. And this young lady, she was a student aide. She was like giving me tutoring and whatnot. And with this particular instance, we were in the cafeteria. And I remember it like it's yesterday, and we're sitting there and we're chatting. She's a friend of mine at this point, you know, because we've seen each other so much in the tutoring classes. And her, I guess, boyfriend comes up, and this, you know, he's a football guy. He's kind of big and whatnot.
What did he say to you?
He said, "So you spend all your time with this nigga?"
Okay, all right.
So this is why you're not, you know, hanging out with me, because of you sitting up here. And me, I kind of like did the whole thing like a movie script. I like looked around, and I couldn't believe. I was like baffled, you know, before the anger took over and me being upset and taking my tray and just getting into a big brawl in the cafeteria. And it just really jolted me, because as I told you, I was under the impression back then as a young 18-year-old impressionable kid, 17-year-old. No, I was 18. I thought white people were afraid of black people. That's what they said in my neighborhood. That's why we never saw them, because they're afraid of black people, right? So when you go to college and then you have that kind of experience, and mind you, the college is probably 90%, you know, white, and you have like Asian and other nationalities there, but it was probably, in one of my classes, it was probably like three of us total out of 200 people in the classroom. So that experience was very interesting, but I still haven't had an array of it, even still. But that is one instance that I had where it kind of jolted me and just made me open my eyes even more so on how the world really is. But I had so many great interactions with so many different ethnicities there. I didn't let that stop me from loving people and interacting with people. I still have great friends from that college even to this day.
Well, we're gonna jump a little bit deeper into your background, because now you're here in Pasadena.
Yes.
You've been in Pasadena for quite some time now.
Yes.
And you're making your rounds around here. You also have you know, what I found refreshing about you is you're a family man.
Absolutely.
You know, I've met your wife, I've met your children. You know, one of your sons is here with us today. It seems like everywhere I see you, you're with your family.
Right.
Beautiful family, and for that I can celebrate the Black excellence.
For sure, thank you.
In that. Now, with your foundation, Fly Kicks for Kids, what's that all about?
So, many years ago, for like 4.5 years, I worked for Erickson Mental Health Center. And that is a group home facility, mental health facility as well too. And I started out being a counselor there. I was working at a group home, and as time went on, I was working with multiple group homes up under that same umbrella. And what ended up happening, once I transitioned and moved from that particular job, I actually stayed in touch with a lot of the boys that I was mentoring at those places. And I've seen the kids go from, coming back from slicing their wrists or having all these different things on their mind as far as depression and stuff, into going to college. I have one kid, this is a great story. He came in so hardcore, tats all over, braids and everything. And to this day right now, this guy is one of the top ballet kids in LA, in California.
So you get, but you with the foundation, you
Right.
give away shoes to kids.
So with Fly Kicks for Kids, I created that. So bringing it full circle, I was always giving back, always giving back. A couple years ago, a good friend of mine, Daryl Borkin, which is the co-founder, one of my partners with Fly Kicks for Kids, he reached out to me and was like, I see what you're doing online or Instagram or whatever. We should create something that actually is a hub for us to be able to give back. Daryl is an ex-NFL player, has a lot of connections. Me, I have different connections in multiple industries, and we just felt like it'd be a good opportunity for us to create Fly Kicks for Kids. And so one of the first big events we did, I partnered with City Council member Tyrone Hampton, which attended Cleveland Elementary School. So upon me hearing that they were going to close down, I was pretty bummed about that. And so one of the things I felt like I can do to try to negate or combat that is try to bring some joy and cheer to that environment. And so we came up with this idea to come and give every single student in the school a brand new pair of shoes, and I partnered with K-Swiss for that particular opportunity. And so that's the mission of it, to be able to give away shoes, but also use it as a bridge and platform for us to be able to share our message, but also be open and receptive to if they have ideals, and we can afford them different resources to be able to enact on their ideals and aspirations and their dreams and goals.
Let me check in. You're watching The Conversation Live. I'm your host, James Farr. My guest today is Major Williams. Major is running for mayor, and I really want to unpack his story. When I first learned of you,
Right.
I was a little confused.
Right.
You know what I mean? Because when you typically think of a Republican,
Right.
a conservative,
Right.
I didn't think of you.
For sure.
You certainly didn't fit the profile.
Right.
Although I know there are several African Americans that are members of the Republican Party.
Sure.
But I don't know if their sneaker game is as fly as yours and as tight as yours. And so you went from being a Democrat
Yes.
to a Republican.
Yes.
How does that happen?
I just think by default I was a Democrat all these years, and I wasn't into politics. I'm not a career politician. So my grandmother was a Democrat, my mother was a Democrat, my aunts were Democrats, and so by default I never questioned it, and I never dove deep into the aspects of what policies do to the communities of our city. And so in doing so, as I have evolved in this political sphere that we're in, the space that we're in, I've been able to educate myself, whether it's self-educating myself or whether it's me working on certain campaigns and traveling all over California and understanding the policies that have been enacted that has tortured our communities. And if you identify and put a label in where it derived from, a good majority of them came from that particular party. And so when we're talking about God, when we're talking about family, when we're talking about values, I actually was around Republicans, but I didn't know it because we never talked politics. And so when a good friend of mine ran for lieutenant governor last year and wanted me to work on his campaign, I was like, oh, this is the racist white guy, old white guy, and this is who I shouldn't trust, and this is who I shouldn't be with. But I've been knowing this guy 7 or 8 years, and he's been great for me in my life and for my family, and I've done great work with them. I don't agree with that narrative, and I think it's very important for the listeners even listening, is that it's okay to change. It's okay to evolve. It's okay to re-educate yourself on certain ideologies that are embedded in you from a certain place. As we grow, we evolve.
But I mean, how do you, as a man of color,
Yes.
as an African American, as a brother, like how do you reconcile the negative narrative, and in many cases, it's flat out racist?
For sure.
Policies.
Right.
How does that reconcile with you? I mean, where are you in that space, and how do you see yourself in
So
that
two
space?
parts. One of them is that the media drives a certain narratives narrative on both sides.
Well, we're not talking about the media. I'm talking about you.
As far as what I
how
feel.
does that land with you when you hear Jews will not?
Right.
You know what I mean? When
right.
you hear some of the things that we've seen that have really been kind of brought on by your party, the commander-in-chief. So how does that land with you?
It's a unique direction for me to actually have, because I really try to focus on Pasadena versus national politics. And what happens is when people think black conservative and they see me, they absolutely attach me to the leader of the party. Sometimes I feel like it's unfortunate, but it's something that I'm aware of and responsible enough to respond in a way that hopefully it resonates with people and it makes sense. And I would say that I think on either side, I've looked at either sides because I've been on either sides, and I've seen everyone say disparaging things at certain points in certain times, but I've also seen sound bites taken out of context. And I think that a lot of times when they're relating me to something that someone else is saying, it really isn't my preference, but I can agree to disagree. Like if he says something or someone says something, a part of the party, I'm not going to agree with it. And the great thing about it, and I'm sure we're going to talk about the Blexit.
Yeah, perfect segue.
So,
I mean, you've aligned yourself with Candace Owens.
So one of the great things about
extremely controversial.
Right.
May not be everybody's favorite.
Sure.
Very strong, opinionated sister, and has her views.
Right.
But she also gets a lot of "bye Felicia" from a lot of people within the community.
Right.
You spoke at the Blexit event.
Yes.
And you invited me. I wasn't able to attend. But when I saw some of the pictures, I couldn't believe how many people of color right here in Southern California wearing MAGA hats and Blexit. And then you spoke. How does that happen?
I think it just becomes one of those things where people are opening their minds up to different civil conversations. Once you're actually able to have a discourse with someone that you felt like or heard that you didn't agree with, but you meet them in person and you have a dialogue with them, you get a sense of authenticity. A lot of people don't get an opportunity to be a part of authenticity because they are attached emotionally to sound bites and things that have been shared through social media, and so they create their narrative from that. So me being a part of it, and I said it on the stage at Blexit, how I actually came a part of the whole Blexit movement and how we befriended each other, it was me challenging her. And so even to this day, we agree that we don't agree on everything 100%. But we've cultivated a relationship and we can be civil and support each other. Now I consider her an ally and a friend. And so that's what's happening within this party. And we're not, and they're not, and she's not advocating for them to leave the Democrat Party to go to the Republican Party. She's just identifying the facts that come along with the policies of the Democrat Party.
She's very outspoken for the 45th. She's aligned herself with the 45th. So how can she not be looking? How can that movement, and I don't care what party a person belongs to, but how can it not be anything but trying to aggregate people over to the Republican Party? What do you say?
I think you have to be creative. You have to be very creative in your messaging. And the undertone of it, once you have a one-on-one conversation, or if you ask the actual question, what is it about and what is it for, you would get the answer that you're looking for. You can take any particular situation and look at it as a blank canvas. You can paint your own picture and see what you want to see. We can all look at the same piece of artwork, and every single person who walks past that painting could have a different emotion and feeling and action, a reaction from that particular painting. No different than the messaging with Candace Owens. And so I could sit here and agree with you on certain things when it comes to how it could be perceived in regards to some of the things that she has said, whether it be in the past or here in the future with the things that just happened. I believe she was in Europe and in the UK. But then she did a live, Periscope, and explained exactly, how that was portrayed.
But we don't want to spend our time talking about Candace. Candace, you can check in.
Pasadena first.
You can check in here too. You're watching The Conversation Live. I'm your host, James Farr. My guest today is Major Williams. Major is an early candidate for the mayor of Pasadena. And I'm going to get to that question that I know everybody is dying for me to ask. But before I do, I really want to understand, why are you qualified? Why should someone listening and watching this say, I'm going to support you and vote for you. What makes you qualified to be our mayor?
Honestly, so I want to paint this narrative, and I've been getting that question a lot lately, and I've been loving getting that question because, and my response has evolved and it fluctuates. But one of the things I want to say to people is that politics is only a word. The word politics is a label. Every single day, every one of us play politics, whether you're married, whether you're negotiating with your kids. Politics is the art of negotiation.
I understand that,
and making things happen.
But why you? Like, that's the question you got to answer.
So why me is because everything that I've done in my life in different industries, in real life instances, has prepared me to be able to lead, first of all, and also to be able to be in a situation to process information that's given to me.
Well, let's drill down on some things.
For sure.
You know, we're going to get up on the clock. Monday night, the city, in a 7-1 vote, passed the ordinance to fast track minimum wage to $15. You were there all night. I was there all night. What's your experience in that? I mean, when you look, you heard all the council members speak and their different positions. Specifically, how do you feel about Mayor Tornick's?
His decision?
His decision.
Well, what I've heard in the past that he's always been supportive of it is just speaking to the different community leaders, the people in the resident that are employees, and also from different owners as well. I feel like he made the best choice if he's for it, you know. But what he did was he framed it in a way where he gave himself an outlet. So I don't know if you heard him when he was saying, he leaned over and said, this is a part of an ordinance that we created, so we can always go back if it doesn't work. That's the gateway that a politician that's looking to get reelected, it's going to hang his hat on. So behind the scenes, he's a smart enough guy to know that if he preface it in that particular way, so even if the owners and the business owners are upset about it, because he said that one little part, which I caught, I don't miss anything, that puts him in a good space because for whatever reason, when 15 hits July 1st, 2020, and it doesn't work for that short amount of time, they can always go back to the drawing board, and that gives him the leeway to be able to be on both sides.
How do you feel about cannabis in the city?
I have zero interest in stopping the flow of what it has been. I don't believe any of the pre-existing shops should be closed. I agree with a lot of different residents in regards to the travel and the convenience, and especially if it's for health reasons, for chronic pain. I support it 100%. I have no issue with it when it comes to that. I feel like it's a monopoly that's being created that's actually not allowing these companies to exist and to benefit for themselves and for their families. But the great part that I feel like the city is not recognizing, it's revenue for the city. Because they're already saying we have a revenue problem, which we don't. We just have a spending problem, and particular people in certain places that are mismanaging the funds that we do have by not being able to know what the priorities are for the city.
Police relations. I mean, you were at the forum that I facilitated last week.
Great forum too, by the way. It was great.
With Chief Perez as well as City Manager Steve Wormel. How do we change that? I mean, if you were the mayor, what would be different? Because what Mayor Tornick told me when I asked him, and I've invited him on this program several times, and his remarks were he didn't feel it was a politician's position to be involved in that conversation. What do you say to that? Well,
I think we need a different approach, and I've said this even on social media. My name is different. You know, when it comes to the interaction, I feel like a mayor has to step away from what the definition of, and that's what's happening with a lot of our elected officials, even the leadership in the mayor. They're sticking to the letter in regards to the definition of what a mayor actions is and what they're supposed to do. In order to progress and for us to really make change in this particular city, you have to think outside the box, and you have to do a little bit more, because you spend all of your time in a city council meeting and you leave at 11:30, you feel like you've done a good job for the city. You've put in the work. But the real work is stepping outside of the definition of what a mayor actually is supposed to do. And so I feel like you should be a part of that process and speak to the chief and come up with solutions and bring ideas to him. And one of the things that I said this in the city walk with Tyrone Hampton present, I feel like, I don't know if it's possible, but I feel like there should be a time period where police officers are allowed to just not be on the clock for like 6 months after every 2 years.
So you suggest like a little sabbatical?
A sabbatical. Because
why would that be important? Why do you?
Because data.
The union gonna say you crazy. The police association rather is gonna say that's crazy.
Because they don't want to acknowledge the data. They don't want to acknowledge the data, and they don't want to acknowledge mental health. They don't want to acknowledge the repercussions that come from those type of things. They don't want to acknowledge, because there's a certain bravado when it comes to that. I respect the law enforcement. I have a good relationship with Chief Perez. But I just think that when you see someone bludgeoned to death, or someone killed, or a kid that's been murdered, or you yourself with your service weapon have to use excess force or whatever, that is a psychological trigger that you're not taking, you're not acknowledging that, and they're not unpacking that, so to speak.
Let's check in. You're watching The Conversation Live. I'm your host, James Farr. My guest today has been Major Williams, who is running for mayor in the year of 2020. He's the first person to announce his candidacy for here in the city of Pasadena. Major, the burning question is what everybody wants to know, me included. Are you with Trump? Are you a Trump supporter?
I stand with the President of the United States. I absolutely do. I lobbied for the First Step Act in Washington with Candace.
Do you support a border wall?
I do. I support the border wall. I support the President. I support the border wall, and for various reasons. I do feel like there is a lot of misinformation that's going on. But if you go and educate yourself and you go to the border, you'll see how weak our border system is.
Well, we're coming up on our time, man. So, yeah, I'm definitely going to have you back on here again. You know, I understand you've been accepted an invitation to visit the White House.
Yes.
I believe it was O'Shea Jackson said that he never would ever have dinner with the president. So, again, you're watching The Conversation Live. I'm your host, James Farr. The Conversation Live focuses on social justice, restorative justice, inclusion, and equality. Join us next week, next Wednesday, 3 p.m. right here on the Arroyo channel and live on Facebook at theconversation.live. Until we can talk with you again, agape.